Thank you for joining me. This is my next presentation, Implementing Financials. And let me go ahead and get started. Who's this directed to? Who would benefit from this slideshow? A manager or functional expert interested in implementing an ERP or changing ERPs, an implementation lead, or someone studying to be an implementation. This will review many of the steps to implement a software. There's many on the market: Workday, Oracle, Oracle EBS, SAP. What I'm going to reference in this presentation is mostly Oracle products, namely Oracle Cloud, some EBS, so just be aware of that. But that being said, I want to make it agnostic. If you if your financial processes are messy and need a better structure, again, that's why you would implement an ERP. As I mentioned before, this presentation will be mostly ERP agnostic, and this will serve as a primer, kind of a basic coloring book for ERP financials. In a visual way, what you're seeing is the Oracle Unified Method. This is the preferred methodology for Oracle Cloud. It's replaced by the AIM methodology. But basically, just for a visual, this is what I'm going to be going over. This is these first four, and in particular, the inception, elaboration, and construction phases. So basically, heavily requirements, heavily analysis, and some design. And as far as the design goes, I'm going to be referencing, again, Oracle Cloud products. I do believe that the design phase should be similar to Workday, to anybody else, but I'm going to be referencing Oracle Cloud, I think. But again, the purpose of these videos is really to review the mindset, thought process of implementing an ERP. I think I mentioned on my last video, most of these things fail in the requirements process right here, the one I'm going over. And I think the value of this presentation is it'll be nice and visual and easy, and you'll be able to see kind of an overall view of the requirements and analysis phase of an ERP implementation. So that's the logic behind that. So here are some workshop questions. I'm not going to go over these, but there's a bunch you need to ask, particularly about financials. But again, I'm not going to review these. Here's a second slide with workshop questions, and finally, here's a third slide. So obviously, a lot of workshops to get your basic enterprise and your basic GL established. So a lot of thought that needs to be put in this. That's why I'm doing this video. Defining an enterprise. Now, this term is Oracle Cloud term, but my thought is that there'll be a lot of parallels with other Workday, other as well. To me, I've worked with Microsoft AX and Oracle NetSuite, and there were some similarities. So I think whatever the process should be the same. This basically is Oracle Cloud's enterprise performance and planning business process model. This is the activities you have to go through. This shows all the major implementation tasks. These tasks will span the whole corporation. That's kind of the nature of an ERP. Things interlocking, that's what you want, to join things together as an enterprise. So anything you do in inventory or a sale you ship out is immediately reflected in your general ledger. The information obviously has to be good, or it's good. Your managers can make better decisions. Um, Taxes lower, just a lot of, there's a reason people spend a lot of money to implement. An enterprise is a collection of legal entities having common control and management. Um, Let me go on to the next slide. So when you're defining an enterprise, you're doing it, again, to represent an organization with one or more legal entities. And you're going to define organizations to represent each area of the business within the enterprise. This is a graphic I really like. I mean, when you're thinking about Oracle in very broad terms, or an ERP in very broad terms, this is kind of what your mind should be thinking. You can see here, it's just, I don't know how to describe this, a three-dimensional, there's little small blocks. It means you can get very granular reports, very, very granular security, and just better information. You'll notice there's three axes here. There's a functional access, a legal access, and a business access. You know, you have to ask yourself what kind of reports these individual managers will want in each of these little tiny blocks. And you know, as far as legal access, these government entities are really clamping down on corporations, so you want good legal reports, tax reports, to make sure you're complying with everything. Regarding the legal access, again, the government entities want their taxes. They may have regulations that the ERP can assist with. These legal entities, they have a right to employ people in the area that the company is registered. Obviously, they must pay income and transaction taxes if the government requires that. And sometimes VAT taxes are required. Those are popular in Europe. Um, Here, you know, when you're thinking of the legal access, you really want to think about isolating legal risks, and we'll talk about that later, and optimizing taxes. Regarding the business access, um, the management structure can include, you know, division, subdivision, lines of business, strategic business units, profit and cost centers. Management structure is shown on the business axis. In Fusion applications, the management structure is implemented using divisions and business units, as well as being reflected in the chart of accounts. Finally, the functional axis. You reflect the efforts and expenses of your functional organizations directly on the income statement. Organizations must manage and report revenues, cost of sales, functional expenses such as R&D, and administrative expenses. So let me pop on to the next slide. Just here is, again, this is an Oracle Cloud graphic, but a few more workshop questions or thoughts. You know, your business units, which are here, you know, you have to think about what kind of autonomy these two business units should have. In other words, you know, as far as reporting, as far as letting other people, business unit one, see what business unit two is doing. You know, accounting policies. So things you want to think about. Now, this first level is the Infusion Corporation. For this graphic, it represents an enterprise. As I mentioned before, it's a collection of legal entities sharing common control and management. You obviously need, at this point, you need a location for tax purposes, and consolidated reports for stockholders and government. The second level is divided into enterprise divisions. Each country will want to tax the entities. The US and the UK will require reports. So here, yeah, you can see that these two entities will require different reporting. So, cloud, Oracle Cloud, Oracle's been in business doing this type of thing for 30 plus years. So they do have a good idea of what these particular entities need. So a lot of the reports are standard. So, and it's very nice. One of the advantages of an ERP is they do think about those things. Third level, these are ledgers. Um, you can see just a definition for Oracle, EBS, and Cloud. A ledger generally has to have its own currency, a chart of accounts, an accounting calendar, ledger processing options, and accounting method for all the associated stuff. And you can see here that 3 ledgers, and in particular this one, you can see this one uses the GBP, the pound. These are USDs. You can see that the calendars are different as well. So at least with Oracle Cloud, you'd have to have different ledgers, unless the currency was the same, and the chart of accounts was the same, and the accounting calendar was the same, and the ledger processing options are the same. You could have just one ledger, but in a case like this, when you just have such differences, you need to have more than one. So another thing I want to bring up here is you can notice that all the transactions are going to be done in the pound, but the reporting is going to be done with US dollars. Another thing I want to point out about this, an Oracle fund you think about, but these are only primary ledgers. In Oracle Cloud, you have the option of doing a secondary ledger. So what would happen is if you did have a separate secondary ledger, for instance, on a standard, periodic basis, you could transfer all this information. You could transfer balances. You could transfer, which is in the higher level. You could transfer individual journals, or you could just do adjustments. So you could have a second ledger here, and basically give the reporting maybe instead of USD and pound, the pound, and you could have just reports that would be available that you couldn't really create if you only had a primary ledger. You do have the option of having a secondary ledger. It depends on your legal requirements or any other requirement. Something obviously that has to be addressed in the workshop. But anyway, for this example, all you have is primary ledger. This is another cloud function. The business units, you can see here there are 4. A business unit is a unit of an enterprise that performs one or many business functions that can be rolled up into a management hierarchy. So a business unit can process transactions for many legal entities. So it doesn't have to be one legal entity. So normally each one of these, boom, 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 would have their own manager. They'd have their own manager, strategic objectives, and a level of autonomy. So, you're really just kind of isolating these things. So you've got one manager who is responsible, and obviously that's how corporations like to run. So you can have, reports, your standard reports for each of these business units. So these business units are good for management reporting, transaction processing, transactional data security, and reference data sharing and definition. Again, management reporting, that's self-explanatory. Transactions processing, yeah, this business unit can process transaction and not have to deal with the clutter of business unit 2 or business unit 3. Again, transaction data security. Obviously, your payables or something money going out is something you want to keep hidden. So you have the ability to shield the other two companies, the other two units from seeing that. And that is about what I want to say about that. Each of these business units has many functionalities. An older term, I guess you could say, as far as functionality, you have like accounts receivable type functions, accounts payable type functions, order management. There's about 16 or 17, and project functionality, but I'm not going to go through all of them. I will dive deeper. So this fifth level, legal entity, as you can see here, some of these have many legal entities. These legal entities roll up into this ledger. See that. So perhaps if you need particular legal reporting for these, it's a good way to separate them out, but by legal entities. Finally, the sixth level, these are, you can see, warehouses. These would be kind of inventory organizations. And, the general ledger and the financials obviously do stretch down this low. You obviously want to keep count of your assets, keep count of your stock, your inventory. So yeah, it's definitely, again, a very connected software. So it's a good. Oracle Enterprise Setup, Diagnostics, and Reporting. This is strictly if you're an Oracle Cloud user. It's really nice what they have here. When you set up this enterprise, as we mentioned earlier, it has many functionalities as the previous slide: business units, legal entities, ledgers, just a very complex system. You can run diagnostic tests after you set it up. It's kind of a guided setup, but for instance, you can run diagnostic tests on your chart of accounts, your value sets and values, your account hierarchies, accounting calendars, legal entities and legal reporting units, ledger setup. Very granular, as you can see. So it will flag you. This is a very important step, obviously, getting the enterprise set up correctly. So you'll get a lot of nice flags. It's a nice, very nice progress from Oracle EBS. You really didn't have this functionality in EBS, and it's a nice thing to have. I'm impressed with what Oracle is. And I would say you should have a lot of the similar functionalities in other software as well. Nature of the beast, the software is getting better, and smaller businesses are using it, and it's a good thing. So reports exist that give the same type of information as this. So basically, a very good, once you've created your enterprise, you could take a good hard look at it, see if it's what you want, and have excellent diagnostic tests and reporting tests. So the Oracle Enterprise Structure Configurator, this is kind of the configurator I was speaking of. It's a guided wizard. It has rollback options. So you can also set up multiple configurations, compare different scenarios. And you can use individual setup options as you could with Oracle EBS, but that's really not recommended. So as you can see here, This first step is what I want to talk about. You establishing enterprise structures, as mentioned in the previous slides, divisions, legal entities, business units, reference data sets, all of these individual things you'll be putting into the Oracle Enterprise structure. Regarding legal entities, a legal entity is defined as a recognized party with rights and responsibilities given by legislation. So legal entities have the following rights and responsibilities. You can own property, you can trade, you can acquire and repay debt, you can account for this, your legal entity can account for themselves to regulators, tax authorities, and owners, according to the specific legislation. And a legal entity has responsibility for elements of your enterprise because you want to facilitate local compliance. Important one here, minimize the enterprise's tax liability, prepare for acquisitions of disposal of parts of the enterprise, and isolate one area of the business from risks in another area. So these rights and responsibilities are obviously enforced through the judicial system. So business risks. Just as far as separating legal entities, if you have an enterprise that, say, develops property and leases property, you have two separate enterprises. And say, for instance, your development of property, obviously developing property, a lot of construction, a lot of legal issues can come of that from I don't know, injuries on the job and not meeting specs requirement of the state. What you can do is create another legal entity to separate the limit the risks from your property development and your leasing business. Legal entities. Legal entities. I want to go over this one by one. The importance of using legal entity on transactions. All the assets of the enterprise are owned by individual legal entities. So Oracle Fusion allows you to enter legal entities on transactions that represent a movement in values or obligation. So for instance, like one transaction, a sales order, one transaction creates an obligation on the legal entity that books the order and promises to deliver the goods on the acknowledged date. And the creation also creates an obligation on the purchaser to receive and pay for those goods. So contract law in most countries contains statutes that state damages can be sought for both if either one of those promises is broken. Legal entities will legal process will determine actual losses, putting the injured party in the same state as if they had not entered into the contract. It's called basically a loss of bargain, or or profit that would have been made on the transaction. So very important. And here you could see you'll have as your employees enter in these legal transactions, you'll have documentation that can be very useful in a lawsuit if it comes to that. So very, very functional. Legal entities, I want to review legal entities and its relationship to business units. A business unit can process transactions on behalf of several legal entities. Divisions. A division can correspond to a collection of legal entities. Ledgers. A legal entity must be mapped to a ledger. Within a ledger, a legal entity can be mapped to one or more balancing segment values. That is good enough for that slide. If you do need the slideshow, I have some other detail, but I'm not going to go into it right now. Let me go to the next slide. Legal entities using Oracle Cloud. All right, this is just a visual. This is why I'm doing this, so you can kind of see what's going on. Tax reporting unit and legislative data group. So as far as legal entities, you can see there's 3 divisions. Again, for obvious reasons, you need to split this into 3 divisions. There's going to be different legislative tax requirements for all 3 of these. Let me drill down. This, you can see here, there's a US, the UK, and a France. Notice how each of these countries have their own tax reporting unit and legislative data groups. Again, this is more Oracle Cloud specific, but you can see what's going on here. But an ERP and Oracle Cloud gives you the ability to split these up, these countries up. And as you can see, there's a business unit. In this case, a business unit attached to each one of the countries. So at this point, I'm going to stop the presentation just so the upload's not too large. But what I'll do is I will create a new one. And I look forward, hopefully you'll watch the next video. Hopefully it hasn't been too boring. But thank you for listening and have a good day.